The story begins on a rainy night. Several men are seen fighting against a group of hired assassins who have slaughtered many. The leader of the men asks how long they plan to keep attacking, but the assassins ignore him and charge. The men raise their swords and fight to defend themselves. 3 assassins immediately attack the leader, saying today is the end of his life. However, the man easily rips them apart. Even though he can fend off some attacks, he knows the number of enemies is overwhelming. Furiously, he calls them murderous bastards. He knows who sent them and can't believe the party he once made a deal with has now betrayed him. He turns toward the carriage behind him and swears to protect the person inside. He orders his subordinates to hold the line, assuring them that reinforcements are on the way. But suddenly, someone's head is thrown to the ground. A man says, "Is this the help you were talking about?" The leader is shocked. He can't believe their reinforcements have been wiped out. He wonders who did it. When he looks up, he sees the leader of the Murim alliance standing among the assassins. That man is known as Dam Chunhak, the first sky-piercing sword. Chunhak steps forward and admits he's impressed by the Pavilioness's strength. The leader replies that he also didn't expect Chunhak to be so arrogant. He adds that if Chunhak had met his master, things might have turned out differently. The assassins get angry at his words. They threaten to cut out his tongue. But before they act, a woman steps out of the carriage and asks them to stop. The leader is surprised to see her and immediately calls her Lady Hyen. Hyen tells the leader not to worry about her. Chunhak tells the assassins to fall back and approaches Hyen. He says he didn't expect his daughter to be fooled by scoundrels and run away from home. He will give her one last chance to return to him. He believes Hyen is a smart girl who will make the right decision. Hyen asks, if she goes with him, will the others be spared? Chunhak stares sharply. Hyen understands and apologizes. Chunhak didn't expect his daughter to apologize. Because that means she won't come back home. With a cold stare, he raises his sword and strikes down his own daughter. The leader yells for him to stop. Chunhak says that from now on, he no longer has a daughter. He orders the assassins to execute their main mission, reclaim the Central Plains. He commands them to clean up all the mess. The assassins charge toward the injured men. The leader manages to kill 3 approaching assassins. He shouts to his men to fight until the end. The men respond with shouts and fight without fear. Meanwhile, Hyen, lying on the ground, speaks in her heart. She says that she must return somewhere. She apologizes for failing to fulfill her promise. She vows that next time, everything will be different. In a grand palace, a man is reporting to his master. The master firmly asks for the report to be repeated. His name is Mudok, the ruler of the Sea Palace. His subordinate reveals that Lord Hyen, sent for negotiations, was instead killed along with his entourage. Upon hearing that, Mudok releases a terrifying cold energy throughout the palace. His subordinates don't move, but anger is clearly visible on their faces. Mudok swears to erase the Murim alliance from the map. He orders his subordinates to prepare. Moments later, the men gather outside. Mudok leads them and says, "We're heading to the Central Plains." Chunhak is now seriously injured and lying on the ground. Several swords are embedded in his body. He looks around and sees only a sea of corpses. He can't believe all his troops have been wiped out. He realizes the energy in his body is depleted. He knows this may be the end of his life. He tells the Northern Sea Palace leader to kill him now. Mudok stares coldly and approaches. He asks why Chunhak killed his own daughter. Chunhak laughs maniacally and calls the question foolish. He says a leader's daughter must not fall in love with a scoundrel. He believes letting Hyen live would have been an even bigger mistake. Hearing that, Mudok gathers energy and pierces Chunhak's heart. Chunhak can't believe this is how his life ends. Memories of his daughter flash before him. He recalls raising her with love. He wonders why she betrayed him. He remembers cutting her down without hesitation. Filled with regret, he breathes his last. With Chunhak's death, the 6-year war comes to an end. Mudok now becomes the undisputed ruler of the Central Plains. Yet that day, he shows no emotion. He only stares at the moon with an empty gaze. The scene shifts to Mudok's room. There, a flower appears wilted and deprived of nourishment. Mudok realizes that the flower is the only thing left from his past. He falls into thought, remembering how he got it long ago. Suddenly, Hyen barges into his room while he's writing. The girl calls him Gaga. Mudok asks, "What is it?" Gently, Hyen asks him to look at the flower. She says the love lotus flower has finally bloomed. Hearing that, Mudok is surprised. He recalls that the love lotus only blooms when two people truly love each other. With teary eyes, Hyen says she has never doubted Mudok's feelings. She explains she was once disappointed because the flower didn't bloom. But now she's happy because it has bloomed beautifully. She feels her love isn't one-sided. Hyen says that Mudok truly loves her. Mudok embraces her tightly. He says he can't love anyone except Hyen. He feels grateful to the flower for making Hyen happy. He decides to fill the garden with love lotus flowers as a remembrance. He gently touches the flower and says he can never forget Hyen. Right after he says that, the flower blooms again. Mudok is startled and doesn't understand how it could happen. He immediately calls someone named Muyong. The man appears right behind him. Muyong immediately kneels and asks what happened. Mudok orders him to find someone who can explain the strange incident. He tells him to search for that person, even if it means traveling across the entire Central Plains. Muyong accepts his master's command and disappears. A few days later, a group of elderly men known as the Botches people said to know everything in the world gather at the North Sea Palace. They have no idea why they were summoned. While they're in discussion, a voice from the sky tells them to step outside. Curious, they walk out, and what they see stuns them. The garden is filled with blooming love lotus flowers. One of them remarks that it's the first time he's ever seen a garden like this. Love lotus flowers are rare, some may never see one in their entire lifetime. But here, the garden is full of them. They also see the character for love beautifully etched onto the flower stalks, almost like embroidery. They're convinced that what they're seeing is truly the love lotus. While they're still in awe, Mudok appears behind them and asks, "Do you like the garden?" The men turn and nod. One of them asks, "Who are you?" Mudok introduces himself and says he is the owner of the garden. The men are shocked to realize they're standing in front of the absolute ruler of the Central Plains. Mudok explains that he and his lover once made the love lotus bloom through their love. But the flowers withered when his lover died. He then says that just a few days ago, the flowers bloomed again. The men are stunned. They can't believe the love lotus could bloom again after it had wilted. To them, it's an illogical and strange phenomenon. Then, one of the elderly men says there's one possibility. Mudok immediately steps in front of him and asks him to explain. The old man suggests that perhaps Mudok's lover has been reincarnated somewhere in this world. Hearing this, Mudok's face turns grim. With a trembling voice, he asks, "Is that true?" The old man becomes nervous seeing Mudok's expression but insists there's no other logical explanation for the blooming flower. Mudok smiles, because for the first time in a long while, he feels a sense of hope. Even though he succeeded in his ambition to unify the Central Plains and bring prosperity to the North Sea, his heart remained empty. As the northern lands flourished, his longing for his lover only grew deeper. He then asks the old man how to find his lover. According to the man, the love lotus emits a faint glow when two fated souls are in the same place. He adds that the flower will shine when Mudok meets his lover. That reminds Mudok of the glowing lotus flower Hyen once showed him. He hadn't thought much of it at the time. He never imagined the flower held such a great secret. The elder explains that it would be hard for Mudok to carry a living flower everywhere. He suggests turning the love lotus into a gemstone so it can be carried easily. Mudok asks if that's possible, and the elder confirms that it is. Mudok turns away and says he'll entrust everything to the elder. He declares they'll depart in 10 days and instructs them to complete all preparations before then. The elder accepts the order. Mudok then presents golden boxes, saying each of them will receive 100 nong of gold if everything goes well. The men are shocked by this. They ask, "Are you serious?" But Mudok simply says he's leaving now. The men bow and ask him to take care of himself as he heads back to his room. Mudok gazes out the window, still finding it hard to believe that hope has returned to him. In his heart, he makes a promise he will never let go of this hope. He swears that he will find Hyen, no matter where she is. He also pleads with his beloved to wait for him. Some time had passed. A ship was seen sailing toward an unknown destination. Inside the ship, Mudok stared at a map. He realized that he had visited almost every place on the map, except for one, Hainan. It had been 3 years and 5 months since he began his search, yet he had found nothing across the Central Plains. During that time, Mudok had advanced from the Rana flower stage to Rana sage, undergoing 2 complete metamorphoses. Now, he was certain that his beloved must be in Hainan. Clutching the gem Hyen gave him, he recalled their conversation. At that moment, Mudok slammed his hand on the table and pleaded with Hyen not to go. He questioned why she wanted to leave him. Hyen explained that attending the negotiation was her father's decision. She hoped her presence would help him understand Mudok's good intentions. But Mudok reminded her that the negotiation could be a trap. Still, Hyen begged him to let her go. Just this once, she wanted to trust her father. After thinking it over, Mudok finally agreed on one condition: if anything felt off, Hyen must return immediately. Hyen smiled and, reaching into her clothes, pulled out a necklace. It was a keepsake from her late mother, said to have the power to return to the one who gave it. She handed it to Mudok, promising she would never leave him. Mudok regretted not stopping her departure. While he slept, the sound of people shouting woke him. A massive storm had struck. He rushed to the deck and saw chaos as everyone tried to save the ship. Suddenly, a huge shadow loomed. Turning around, he saw a giant wave about to crash down. Acting fast, Mudok wrapped himself in a protective key barrier and activated the 1,000-pound hammer technique. As the wave hit, several people were thrown into the sea. A young girl and her father shouted for the mother who had been swept away. Using his telekinetic grasp technique, Mudok hurled planks of wood to help reach the stranded passengers. Before he could do more, a second, even larger wave approached. Mudok knew the ship wouldn't survive. He readied his ultimate technique, freezing ice wind, to freeze the wave. But just before he could unleash it, the gem from Hyen began to glow. A blinding light pierced through the sky, shining on Mudok's body. He shielded his eyes, and his body began to rise and suddenly vanished. The storm dissipated and the sky cleared. The people aboard didn't understand what had happened. When Mudok opened his eyes, he found himself in a small space, a carriage. He didn't know how he got there. Suddenly, a commotion erupted outside. A group of men were fleeing from giant flies attacking them. Nearby, 2 girls were hiding, followed by a man and a boy promising to save them. Mudok then blew apart the carriage with his energy, destroying several flies. He stood beside the wreckage as the traders looked on in shock. They wore unfamiliar clothing, and Mudok guessed he was in another part of the Central Plains. More giant flies came at him. Using his divine white ice palm technique, he froze and shattered them instantly. A man approached and introduced himself as Edmund Rule, leader of the Arali Merchant Association. He thanked Mudok and called him a magic swordsman. But Mudok didn't understand a word he said. From Edmund's gestures, he could only guess the man was expressing gratitude. He asked if anyone could speak the Central Plains language. Edmund handed a ring to a bespectacled man, who gave it to Mudok. After wearing it and speaking a spell, Mudok suddenly understood their words. He was shocked. Edmund repeated his introduction and again thanked Mudok. But Mudok denied being a magic swordsman, saying he didn't even know what magic was. Edmund was baffled. How could someone who used ice not know what magic was? He began to suspect that Mudok's origins were extraordinary. When Mudok demanded an answer, releasing a chill from his hand, Edmund panicked and decided to explain everything. That evening, they talked by the campfire. Mudok was stunned to learn about something called magic in this part of the world and realized the world was vast. Edmund, relieved that Mudok had calmed down, asked where the Central Plains were. Mudok, surprised, asked if Edmund truly didn't know where they were. He found it odd that someone could be in the Central Plains and not know it. Edmund became convinced Mudok was insane. He explained that they weren't in the Central Plains, but in a forest leading to the capital of the Drake Kingdom, Barhan. Mudok had never heard anyone call the Central Plains the Drake Kingdom. He asked if Edmund was senile despite not being that old. The merchant was offended, saying he was 50. He was more concerned about Mudok's insistence on being in the Central Plains. Mudok became angry and pointed at a tree, suggesting they ask the boy hiding behind it. The boy, Leo, stepped out once discovered. Edmund asked what he was doing there. Mudok asked Leo directly, "Is this the Central Plains or the Drake Kingdom?" Leo didn't answer. Edmund explained that Leo didn't understand Mudok. He then removed the ring and gave it to Mudok, asking him to wear it and say, "Interpret language." In truth, Edmund didn't want to lend such a valuable artifact to someone crazy, but he couldn't stand being called senile. Mudok wore the ring and did as instructed. As he cast the spell, symbols appeared around him. He quickly realized he could now understand the foreign language. He was amazed by magic. Turning to Leo, he asked the boy's name. Leo responded with his name, and Mudok asked again whether this was the Central Plains or the Drake Kingdom. Leo replied that he didn't know what the Central Plains was and said they were in a forest leading to Barhan, capital of the Drake Kingdom. Mudok was shocked and asked if Leo was also senile. He accused Edmund of coaching the boy to say that. Edmund denied it and suggested Mudok ask the other members of the merchant group if he didn't believe him. From Edmund's honest reaction, Mudok realized he wasn't lying. Then he remembered something strange. He had been fighting a storm on a ship, but when he opened his eyes, he was inside a carriage. Mudok realized that he had been transported somewhere else. As this dawned on him, he felt a sharp pain in his chest, but it quickly faded. He sensed something strange. The necklace asked, "Do you believe?" Mudok began to notice that the energy in this place was unlike anything he had ever felt. He knew something was off. He stood and walked into the forest. Edmund was startled to see him on his feet and called out. As Mudok walked deeper into the woods, he sensed the energy was incredibly pure. This strengthened his suspicion this place wasn't the Central Plains. Leaping into the air, Mudok gathered and compressed his energy. He then released it into his body and realized his Dantian had doubled in capacity. Landing on the ground, he wondered why he was sent here instead of somewhere else in the Central Plains. When his foot touched the earth, the necklace slipped from under his clothes. Mudok began to suspect he had been transported by the light that came from it. He remembered Hyen once saying the necklace had the power to return to its giver. Mudok now believed he was sent here to find Hyen. He smiled as he landed, thinking to himself, Hyen must be here. Back at camp, Edmund's subordinate asked where their guest had gone. Edmund admitted he didn't know, calling Mudok unpredictable. Just then, Mudok reappeared. He explained that he had something to take care of and had one question for Edmund. Edmund was uneasy at Mudok's smile and asked him to get to the point. Mudok asked if Leo had told the truth about them being in the Drake Kingdom. Edmund confirmed Leo was honest, and assured him that they'd reach Barhan if they kept traveling a bit further. Mudok asked where exactly Barhan was. A boy nearby asked Mudok if he really knew nothing about the area. He guessed Mudok had spent his life training in the mountains. The boy had heard tales of people like Mudok but had never seen one in person. Mudok decided to go along with it, saying that he had trained in the mountains and had only come down to see the world for the first time. That's why he knew nothing. He had never heard names like the Drake Kingdom or Barhan, but decided to learn more, especially after noticing some people had different eye colors. He suspected he was now in the Western lands, places he had only heard of in stories. The boy was thrilled, thinking his guess was right. He called Mudok Master Magic Swordsman and offered to teach him a few things. Mudok accepted. The boy walked ahead, asking Mudok to follow. Mudok asked his name, and the boy introduced himself as Luffy. Edmund was disturbed by how the crazy man could act so friendly. He couldn't understand what was going on in Mudok's head. Mudok then began learning about this place and its language from Luffy. He realized this was not a foreign land, it was an entirely different world. The landforms were strange, and the writing unlike anything he'd seen. This world had other beings besides humans, elves and dwarves were real. There were also creatures called beast men. Among them all, the strongest were the ones called dragons, but to Mudok, they were just winged lizards. There were also things called warp magic and magic circles. According to Luffy, warp magic could only be used by 5th circle wizards or higher. They drew magic circles on the ground and cast spells to travel anywhere they wished. The more powerful the wizard, the farther they could go. To Mudok, magic was an incomprehensible science. He looked up at the sky and began imagining other incredible things this world might hold. When he lifted his head, he saw something strange: 3 moons in the sky. That was something he never imagined could exist in the Central Plains. He wondered silently if Hyen was the one who had called him here. As he thought, someone suddenly shouted at a girl named Safina, begging her not to do something. Mudok turned to see something happening near the camp. He asked the man what was going on. The girl was holding a knife and trembling. She warned everyone not to come closer or she'd kill. The merchants pleaded with her not to do anything foolish. A bespectacled man assured her that they could heal both her and Annie once they reached the capital. He said many mages lived there and even promised to ask Edmund for help. He begged Safina to release Annie, who was terrified. Safina asked Charles, the bespectacled man, if he thought she was stupid. She reminded him that healers were rare even in the capital. She asked if he knew how expensive it was to heal one person. She revealed that killer insect eggs had nested in her heart and could hatch at any moment into larvae. She asked if anyone could cure something like that. Charles was speechless. Tears welled in Safina's eyes as she said that once the eggs hatched, both she and Annie would be ripped apart. She raised her knife and said it was better to die whole than torn to pieces. Before she could strike, Mudok intervened. He said he more or less understood the situation. He raised his hand and used energy to pull the knife away from her. He assured her that he would heal her and urged her not to do anything reckless. Safina hadn't even noticed when the knife was taken. As Mudok approached, he asked them to sit. He said treatment must begin immediately. Edmund asked if Mudok could use healing magic. Mudok replied that he couldn't use any magic at all. He only knew a few healing techniques passed down to him. He told everyone to stay calm. Edmund and Charles were relieved. Edmund approached Mudok and begged him to save the girls, promising to repay the favor even if he had little to offer. Mudok said he would help them even without being asked. He told everyone to back away a little and said he would begin treatment. Edmund told his men to move. Mudok approached the girls and told them to relax. He assured them it wouldn't take long and asked them to close their eyes and stay calm. The girls followed his instructions. Using his energy, Mudok scanned their bodies. He found the insects near their hearts. Upon closer inspection, he was shocked they were inside the hearts. But the eggs hadn't hatched yet. Carefully, he used his energy to burn the eggs without damaging the heart. The girls' hearts glowed brightly. After the eggs were incinerated, they let out small gasps. Mudok stood and said the issue was resolved. The girls were surprised and asked if he was serious. Mudok assured them the eggs were destroyed and advised them to stay calm. Edmund and the others were stunned. Edmund asked if Annie and Safina were truly healed. Mudok didn't understand why the merchants still doubted him. He reassured them they were fine and told the girls there would be no side effects and nothing to worry about. The girls bowed their heads and thanked Safina. Safina said that Mudok was their savior, and the others also bowed and expressed their gratitude. Mudok stepped forward and waved gently at them. That night, Mudok was seen resting under a tree. She didn't expect the day to be so exhausting. She touched her precious gem and said she deeply missed her lover on days like this. Looking up at the stars, she prayed to be reunited with Hyen soon. The next day, the group continued their journey toward Barhan. Edmund took off his jacket and placed it over his head, wondering why the weather felt unusually hot. Even Mudok had to tie up her hair due to the scorching heat. The sun was blazing. Luffy then offered her a bottle of water. Mudok thanked him and accepted it. Before drinking, she realized the water was warm. So, she released a bit of cold energy into the bottle, cooling the water instantly. Luffy asked if she was alright, and Mudok replied that the weather was just too hot. Then she handed the bottle to Luffy's face. The boy was surprised to see the water inside was now cold. Mudok asked him to drink it. As Luffy took a sip, he was thrilled to taste ice-cold water in such sweltering heat. Mudok smiled at his reaction and asked, "Is the water that refreshing?" With a bright grin, Luffy pulled out another bottle and asked if she could cool that one too. Mudok saw no reason to refuse, especially since the boy had helped her a lot. The least she could do was cool his water. She extended her hand and released a bit of cold energy. As soon as she said it was done, Luffy started cheering. When Mudok looked at him again, she noticed that the others had gathered around her, all extending their water bottles and pleading with her to chill theirs too so they could taste the refreshing ice water like Luffy did. It wasn't a difficult task for Mudok, but she knew that agreeing to their request might only burden her further. Edmund tapped one of his subordinates and asked what was going on. He approached and asked someone to explain the situation. Luffy told him that Mudok had made ice water and now the seniors wanted to try it too. With an odd expression on his face, Edmund called out to Mudok. She asked if something was wrong. Edmund knelt down and offered his bottle, saying he wanted to taste the ice water too. Mudok was surprised by this. She asked him to hand over the bottle. Deciding to stay with this group to learn more about this world, she realized that these people had helped her overcome one of her greatest obstacles, language. She didn't think giving them ice water was a big deal. So, she chilled Edmund's water, and he immediately thanked her and drank it. However, Edmund felt something strange. He told Mudok that something about the water was different. Mudok didn't expect that reaction. Edmund then asked how she made the ice. Instead of answering, Mudok asked why he wanted to know. Was there something wrong? With a bright smile, Edmund said the ice was absolutely perfect. He admitted that he had tried all kinds of ice from across the continent but had never tasted anything like this before. According to him, the flavor of the ice water was on a whole different level. He said Mudok was truly amazing. Mudok had never heard of ice having a taste. She replied that she simply froze the water, nothing more. She then asked Edmund what he meant when he said the taste was different. Edmund explained that, usually, when making ice, one uses the cold attribute of mana from the air to instantly freeze the water or gathers moisture from the atmosphere. However, in doing so, impurities from the mana mix into the ice, affecting the taste. Since every mage has a unique mana signature, it's extremely rare for someone to create pure ice. In short, it's very hard to produce ice that's completely clean. Edmund said Mudok's ice was exceptionally pure, which is why it tasted so good. Now, Mudok understood why the group had reacted so enthusiastically. She never imagined something as simple as ice could trigger such an intense response. She almost felt pity for them. Since she was in a good mood, Mudok decided to make more ice. With a smile, she started releasing her energy. But before she could do anything, Edmund addressed her as Sword Mage, and Mudok asked if something was wrong. Edmund pointed to the sky and said he had an offer for her. A few days later, Charles was seen directing several men carrying buckets of water. He instructed them to bring the buckets behind the shop. Behind the store, Mudok was gathering energy to freeze the water in the buckets into solid ice blocks. The merchants clapped when they saw this, and someone quickly told the workers to carry the buckets right away. Watching them, Mudok reflected on how she ended up at this point. She had been quite surprised by Edmund's proposal. The man had explained that he wanted to revive his merchant association by selling Mudok's ice. He seemed nervous while making the offer. Mudok then realized Edmund had a hidden motive behind constantly praising how refreshing the ice water was. However, she could also sense that Edmund meant no harm. He genuinely wanted to save his struggling merchant guild. Mudok didn't want to offer her services for free, so she decided to negotiate. She told him the profit split would be 70-30. Edmund asked what she meant, and Mudok clarified that she would take 70% of the profits since she made the ice, and Edmund would receive 30% for selling it. The merchant realized it wasn't a bad deal, especially since ice was in high demand. Still, he tried to negotiate further. He explained that they needed carts for transportation, manpower to pull the carts, and mages to keep the ice from melting. The initial investment would be quite high. He asked Mudok if she could adjust her percentage. Mudok then said she would lower it to 60%. The man was surprised at how easily she agreed. He pulled out a sheet of paper and said they needed to draft a contract. Mudok agreed to the deal because this place was a good opportunity for her to learn more about the world. It turned out that the business was far more successful than she had expected. While they were still organizing everything, Charles suddenly burst into the room in a rush, breathing heavily. He told Edmund that he needed to come outside immediately. Both Edmund and Mudok were startled and asked what was going on. Outside the shop, a huge crowd had gathered, shouting loudly. They were all demanding to buy ice candy. One person even begged the association to sell them just a bit of ice. A man introduced himself as Arnold and said he had come all the way from the city of Neril to do business with their merchant association. Edmund asked everyone to form a line, but they ignored him and continued shouting. He was completely confused as the crowd grew louder. Suddenly, a voice echoed inside everyone's head, telling them to be quiet. Everyone was shocked to hear a voice in their minds. Edmund immediately turned around. He knew that only Mudok could do something like that. With a serious expression on her face, Mudok told everyone to calm down. She warned that if things got noisy again, they would all be kicked out. She advised them to be cautious. Everyone quickly accepted her warning. Once the situation was under control, Edmund explained that his merchant association only sold in bulk. He apologized to those who had come to purchase in small quantities and asked them to leave. He added that perhaps small-scale sales might be available in the future. However, some still begged him. They said they had traveled from far away and asked if he could make an exception and sell to them in small amounts. Seeing the commotion, Mudok shot a sharp glare at the crowd. They were frightened by the terrifying look on her face and eventually left on their own. Edmund then asked the remaining people to form a proper line. A merchant wearing an eye patch told Edmund that he came from the Mage Merchant Association. The man next to him introduced himself as Benjamin, the head butler of the Konslav family. A dark-skinned man standing beside them said he was from the Arista family. Edmund knew the Mage Merchant Association was one of the top 10 merchant groups on the continent. He hadn't expected someone from a prestigious count family to be standing before him. He realized he would make a lot of money but never imagined he'd be this lucky. He turned toward Mudok, knowing that these people were only there because of her. Even though his merchant association hadn't fully recovered, all of this was happening thanks to her. With a smile, he told Mudok to take a rest. Mudok asked if the busiest part was over, and Edmund confirmed it was. He reassured her that he could take care of the rest and told her to get some rest. Mudok turned around and wished him good luck. Though he felt a little guilty for making her work so much, Edmund had his own reasons for reviving the merchant association. He wanted revenge against Duke Icarus, who had destroyed his family using the Akasa Merchant Association. His parents and siblings had died unjustly. He needed to fully restore his merchant association and use it to get revenge. Edmund made a vow to himself that he wouldn't give up until his revenge was complete. He hoped Mudok would continue working with him until that day came, and he promised to repay her kindness if he succeeded. Meanwhile, in her room, Mudok jumped onto the bed, completely exhausted. Now that the business was thriving and money was flowing steadily, she decided it was time to start gathering information about her lover. While she was deep in thought, someone knocked on her door. It turned out to be Safina. Mudok was delighted to hear the girl's voice at her door. She realized it was snack time and immediately invited Safina in. The girl brought in a large bowl filled with something Mudok's new favorite snack, ice cream. This snack was created accidentally by mixing ice and fruit. Safina placed the bowl on the table, and Mudok thanked her once again for bringing it. Safina smiled and told her to enjoy it. Mudok took a spoonful and tasted the first bite. The ice cream was cold, sweet, and incredibly soft, a flavor she never imagined she could enjoy back in the Northern Sea Palace. Mudok had heard that the Merchant Association was booming thanks to this ice cream, and now she fully understood why. As she licked the bowl clean, she realized it was already empty. She couldn't believe she had eaten it so quickly. She decided to get another one. She didn't really want to go alone, but everyone was busy. As she entered the shop, she heard a commotion outside and became curious about the cause. Outside, she saw Safina asking people to line up. A burly young man smirked and asked who gave Safina the right to order around nobles. Mudok wondered, who is that young man? The boy next to the fat one assumed Safina didn't know who they were. He told her to shut up and bring out the ice cream immediately. The larger boy pointed at Safina and said they had heard rumors about the ice cream, so they came to try it. He warned there would be consequences if it wasn't good. Safina calmly told him that their merchant association did not serve people who cut in line. Her attempt to reason only made the boy angrier. He couldn't believe Safina was asking them to wait in line like commoners. He grumbled that it was already frustrating enough being around regular folks. He didn't like that Safina expected him to queue up. He asked her if she had a death wish. Safina firmly replied that she didn't serve nobles just because of their status. The boy asked if she intended to defy a noble. But the girl knew that Mudok would protect her if anything happened, so she decided to speak her mind freely. She told him he was being unreasonable, she was only enforcing the rules. Another boy, irritated by her response, called her a bitch, drew his sword, and asked if she really wanted to die. Safina wasn't afraid at all, even when faced with the blade. The boy grew even more annoyed by her boldness. But before he could act, a third companion tapped his shoulder and called his name Samuel. With a cold look in his eyes, the boy told Samuel not to act recklessly and asked if he wanted to disgrace their noble standing. Samuel became nervous under his friend's gaze and apologized. The cold-eyed boy then approached Safina. With that same piercing look, he said they had only come to try the ice cream. Safina didn't like that gaze. It made her chest feel frozen and her body tremble. The boy said he didn't like to wait and demanded she bring them the ice cream immediately. Shaken by his presence, Safina stammered and asked him to wait. Suddenly, someone called her name. It was Edmund Moon. He reminded Safina that their merchant association did not serve people who cut the line and asked if she had forgotten. Safina quickly apologized. Mudok could tell that Edmund seemed to have personal issues with that young man, given how strongly he reacted. With an angry face, Edmund told the boy to leave. He said he couldn't tolerate any more rule-breaking. The two boys grew annoyed by his response. They felt that Edmund was insulting the nobles. But Edmund clarified that there was another reason he wouldn't sell ice cream to them. The boy, who appeared to be their leader, asked what that reason was. With an angry look, Edmund told him to ask Duke Icarus directly. Charles and the other merchants were shocked to hear him mention the Duke's name. The boy then asked how Edmund knew his father. As he spoke, he suddenly realized that Edmund's face looked familiar. He recognized the man's eyes, then smiled ominously. The boy asked Edmund if he was one of the survivors of the Merchant Association. His companions were startled by the sinister smile that spread across his face. They all knew that Justin only smiled like that when he was angry. Justin drew his sword and declared that Edmund would pay with his life for insulting a noble. As soon as he finished speaking, he slashed his sword toward Edmund. Edmund shut his eyes in fear. He couldn't believe he wouldn't even have the chance to avenge his family. But before the sword could strike him, Mudok stopped it with her bare hand, shocking Edmund. Mudok then flicked her hand and pushed the boy back. Justin was furious. He called Mudok a bastard and asked if he wanted to die too. Mudok couldn't believe this was all happening just because she came out to buy some ice cream. She never expected that Justin would try to kill someone just for being told that ice cream wasn't sold to those who cut in line. To her, it was utterly ridiculous. She told the brat that he had absolutely no manners and said she would use this opportunity to teach him some. Naturally, this only made Justin even angrier. He channeled energy into his sword and attacked Mudok, saying he would kill her. Mudok easily dodged the first strike. Justin started attacking more aggressively, but Mudok evaded all his strikes without showing the slightest pressure. In fact, she smiled gently at him as she moved. She remarked that his talent was impressive for someone his age but explained that his sword would never land a hit on her no matter how many times he swung it. According to Mudok, truth is always accompanied by reason, and that's what creates harmony. She told Justin that if his actions truly represented the nobility, then the nobles had clearly lost their sense of responsibility. She said she wasn't narrow-minded, and today, she would simply correct his behavior. Justin cursed at her, unable to believe someone dared to speak so rudely to a noble. Suddenly, Mudok was already behind him and calmly said his words were irrelevant. What he needed, she said, was discipline to learn respect. At that moment, Mudok remembered the Central Plains. She realized that her attachment to Hyen had made her forget the ways of the world. In the end, everything came down to the law of the jungle: only the strong survive. Mudok then gathered a bit of energy at her fingertip and fired it at Justin. The technique was called Formless Lesky. The attack struck Justin's wrist, creating a gaping hole. His sword flew from his hand, and he collapsed to the ground. Justin clenched his teeth in rage. Mudok stared at the boy with eyes as cold as ice. Edmund was stunned to see Justin injured, especially since he had no idea what kind of technique Mudok had just used. Justin's friends quickly ran to him, drawing their swords and warning Mudok not to come any closer. The fat one shouted that he would cut her down if she stepped forward. Samuel stood without fear, watching as Mudok continued walking toward them. But then Mudok noticed something surprising: Justin was still trying to get up. She wondered why the boy was still trying to stand. Justin placed his hand on his friend's shoulder and asked him to step aside. With confidence, he stood before Mudok again. Seeing this, Mudok smiled. She found it amusing, as if Justin was putting on a performance. With a chilling smile, she coated her hand in energy and told Justin that she wanted to see how long he could last. Mudok then swung his arm and threw Justin through the air, shocking his friends. Seeing this, the chubby one immediately ran over to Justin and asked if he was okay. But at that moment, he noticed a large hole in Justin's wrist. Mudok looked disappointed to see Justin get thrown that far, especially since he had only used the strength of a first-level warrior. He realized that Justin was even weaker than he had expected. He began to wonder whether he should stop. Mudok realized he still didn't fully understand how this world worked. Because of that, he decided not to kill Justin and instead stepped closer to him. The boy asked who Mudok really was. With a face full of rage, Justin demanded to know what gave Mudok the courage to treat him that way. In his heart, Mudok knew that the boy had truly lost his mind. Instead of self-reflection, he was filled with vengeance. Mudok considered killing him on the spot, but then realized that doing so would make him no different from the others. Justin's two friends then pointed their swords at Mudok. The chubby one asked, "Do you think you can get away with messing around with a noble?" But Mudok ignored them and looked around. He found a stick on the ground and felt that it was perfect. Using his telekinesis, he picked it up. As he held the stick, Mudok gave a terrifying smile. Justin started to panic and quickly stood up. His friends were also shocked by how Mudok retrieved the stick. With a smile on his face, Mudok infused his sword energy into the stick. Justin looked stunned, but it wasn't over yet. Mudok added his sword spare into the stick. Justin started begging him not to come any closer. But with a sinister smile, Mudok inserted his sword key into the stick as well. The boys fell to the ground, trembling. With a horrifying grin, Mudok said that the best remedy for trash like them was a stick. He then swung the stick and began beating them. He advised them to learn self-control. It was clear that Mudok was enjoying the moment. As evening approached, the boys were seen kneeling. They begged for forgiveness and promised never to repeat their actions. Mudok said he couldn't hear them and demanded they repeat it louder. Justin looked irritated upon hearing that. In his heart, he swore that one day he would kill Mudok, wanting to crush the man's head under his feet. But even though he had that desire, he lacked the power to make it happen. With no other choice, he had to beg for Mudok's forgiveness. He promised he would never make the same mistake again. Mudok felt satisfied with the lesson. He realized that nothing worked better than a well-placed blow. He then advised them to be more careful from now on. Edmund, who had witnessed everything, was deeply moved and silently whispered his thanks. The next day, in a castle, a king and his subordinates were seated. Count Slav reported to the king that they had received information from a spy embedded in the Kingdom of Serbia. Upon hearing this, King Tomalova III asked the count to speak. According to Slav, the Kingdom of Serbia had successfully reclaimed the barren land in the north of Blackstone. In addition, the Kingdom of Hazen was trying to expand its territory beyond the Sahara Desert. Duke Sergio von Icarus then explained to Slav that the land beyond the Sahara was too dangerous for humans to inhabit because it was filled with monsters. He asked Count Slav whether the Kingdom of Hazen had a way of dealing with the situation. Slav revealed that they had received a report, but its accuracy had not yet been confirmed. He informed the Duke that Anos had defected there. Clearly shocked, the king's face turned tense. With a nervous expression, Count Kron asked, "Is that true?" Slav responded that it was indeed true. Baron Arista then asked, "Are you talking about one of the 10 strongest sword masters on the continent?" He had heard that Anos had refused every amount of money offered to him. The king wondered why Anos ended up in Hazen instead of wandering the continent without joining any faction. Krani then suggested that perhaps the sword master had fallen in love with someone there. Slav said that guess might be correct. Everyone in the room was shocked to hear this. The king then asked Count Slav, "Who is this woman?" Slav replied that it was someone they all knew well, Princess Dafrin, the younger sister of the current king of Hazen. That king was known as Lair I of Hazen. The men were surprised to hear that Lair II, who treasured his sister more than anything, was willing to give her to a man. King Tomalova then informed his subordinates that the kingdom of Hazen now had 2 sword masters. Slav went on to explain that Hazen would likely try to expand its territory, an ambition they had repeatedly failed to achieve since the reign of the first Lair. King Tomalova grew concerned upon hearing this. To the east, the kingdom of Hazen was expanding southward. Meanwhile, Serbia, focused on trade, was developing land across the Western Sea. The Ziva Empire was also expanding its territory. King Tomalova knew they could not remain idle. He asked his subordinates to share their thoughts on what actions they should take. The Duke then suggested that it would be beneficial for them to expand their own territory as well. But the king reminded him that they had no suitable land for expansion. He asked, "Are you suggesting we cross the Lazar Mountains to the north?" Duke Sergio stood up and told the king that they had no other choice. Everyone was shocked by this. Expanding to the north was extremely difficult. Even if they succeeded, the entire region was covered in ice. This would make all their efforts in vain. Heading north would ultimately mean being excluded from the power struggle. That's why everyone was hesitant. King Tomalova realized that someone would soon be sent north to handle the matter of expansion. He turned to Slav, and Slav nodded at him. The king then informed his subordinates that today's meeting was over. He said they would reconvene at another time. Slav then left the room together with the king. Duke Sergio noticed that Count Slav and King Tomalova were hiding something. Moments later, King Tomalova and Count Slav were seen alone in a room. There, King Tomalova asked Slav if he had made any mistakes recently. Slav replied that he had not. The king realized that the Duke was using his old strategy again. 10 years ago, he had sent anyone who opposed him to the north. Count Slav then told the king that all of this was happening because of his own weakness. But King Tomalova asked him not to say that. He said Slav was the only person he trusted among all his followers. He told Count Slav that he had heard rumors about a kind of ice being sold in the capital. He asked, "Do you know anything about that, Slav?" The count realized the king was talking about ice candy made by the RUL Trade Association. King Tomalova was surprised to hear that name. Slav explained that the ice in question was different from ordinary ice. He said it got its name because of its extremely sweet taste. King Tomalova then asked, "How late is that trade association open?" Slav answered that they were open until night. He realized that the king wanted to try the ice candy. He then revealed to King Tomalova that he planned to go there quietly in the near future. He said they could visit the store together. King Tomalova smiled upon hearing that. He praised Count Slav for being able to read his mind. Slav replied that it was his duty as a subordinate to understand the king's wishes. King Tomalova then asked when he planned to go quietly. Meanwhile, in Mudok's room, the children were seen begging him to teach them magic. At that moment, Mudok was about to lick his ice cream when he was startled by their request. Safina then apologized for entering without permission. She admitted that her behavior had been rude and acknowledged that not everyone could learn magic. He said they had no choice but to learn it. Ani then explained that their association might face danger again, just like before. She promised to train hard and begged Mudok to teach them. Mudok felt pleased by their enthusiasm. He put down his ice cream and reminded them that he did not use magic. Luffy then asked if he used martial arts, as he had previously mentioned. Mudok confirmed this and released a bit of his energy, demonstrating the ice god's palm technique. He told them he couldn't teach magic because he didn't know how to use it himself. Leo then asked, "Can you teach us martial arts instead?" Mudok was surprised by the question. It wasn't what he had meant. The other children agreed with Leo's suggestion. They thought it would be amazing if they could learn martial arts. They begged Mudok to teach them. Mudok didn't know what to say. He saw the sincerity and determination in their eyes. It reminded him of his own childhood when he had once begged someone to teach him martial arts. But that person had only stared at him coldly. Now, in the midst of his search for his beloved, Mudok felt unworthy of taking on students. However, these children also wanted to protect someone. And they had already helped Mudok a lot, even though they barely knew him. According to the rules, Mudok wasn't supposed to teach Northern Sea Palace martial arts carelessly. But he wondered if those rules even applied in this different world. As Mudok was lost in thought, Safina pleaded again for him to teach them. Mudok finally asked for time to think. He told them to return to his room at the same time tomorrow. He said he would give them his answer then. The children were overjoyed. They were convinced that Mudok would teach them. Leo even said they would never forget his kindness, even in death. Mudok realized the kids had misunderstood him. But before he could explain, they had already turned around and left the room, full of excitement at the thought of learning martial arts. They closed the door and told Mudok to get a good night's sleep. Mudok decided to think about it later. He wondered if he had been just like them as a child. He realized his master must have had a hard time dealing with him back then. He opened the window and looked outside. As he daydreamed, he heard the sound of metal clashing from the direction of the forest. He found it odd. In the forest, someone was being killed. The person wore a hooded cloak that covered their face. It turned out to be Count Slav, who was with King Tomalova. He wondered if he could survive until reinforcements arrived. He hadn't expected an ambush on the day they went out just to try some ice cream. While he was thinking, a loud sound rang out behind him. He immediately turned around. He saw a mage chanting a spell fire bomb. The mage created several fireballs and launched them at Slav. The count gritted his teeth and charged toward the attack. A massive explosion shook the forest. The king was shocked by what he saw and rushed toward Slav. But Slav said he was fine. King Tomalova pointed out that Slav's arm was bleeding. Count Slav quickly stood in front of the king. He apologized for being disrespectful, but he insisted it was an emergency. The king understood. Slav hadn't realized that one of the attackers was a mage. He couldn't tell because they all wore the same clothing. He quickly ordered his troops not to lose control. He commanded them to reform their battle formation. The soldiers immediately obeyed. Then, the leader of the assassins said they couldn't let anyone leave alive. One of them declared he would take Slav's head. Slav responded instantly, charging in and decapitating him. The other assassins were stunned by Slav's speed and attacked him together. But Slav deflected their blows and moved toward one of them. He asked who had sent them. The man responded, "You don't need to know, you're about to die anyway." Slav realized that the earlier magic attack had already killed many of his soldiers. It was clear these people had no intention of letting them live. Although he hated the situation, Slav knew he had to protect the king no matter what. He had to do it for the sake of the kingdom. Suddenly, the mage raised his hand, preparing to launch another spell. Seeing this, Slav ordered his men to surround the king and protect him. The mage laughed at the order. He told Count Slav that it was already too late. But before the man could release his spell, he was struck by an ice attack. Everyone was shocked. The leader of the assassins shouted, asking who it was. As expected, it was Mudok. With a smirk on his face, Mudok said it looked like he'd been discovered. He jumped down from a tree and suddenly appeared behind the assassin leader. He quickly knocked out one of the men beside him. He explained that he had only wanted to enjoy the moon, but the noise drew him here. The leader spun around instantly at the sound of his voice. With a terrifying expression, Mudok said he needed to finish this before his ice cream melted. The leader immediately realized Mudok wasn't ordinary. He hadn't even noticed when Mudok appeared behind him. Even though they were caught off guard, their numbers still far outmatched him. The leader decided he needed to kill the king and escape the forest before any other surprises arrived. He drew his sword and charged at Mudok. He declared that he would handle Mudok himself and ordered his men to kill King Tomalova. Mudok blocked his strike with his own blade. He commented that he hadn't expected to see so many different types of swords here. In honor of the leader, he decided to use his sword Seolin. Mudok then challenged the man to come at him with everything he had. The assassin leader was infuriated and launched a furious attack, swearing Mudok wouldn't leave the battle alive. But Mudok was excited and energized. He urged the man to give it his best. Effortlessly, Mudok parried the attacks. The assassin then drew a second sword and launched a flurry of quick strikes. Yet Mudok dodged every one of them with ease. The man combined both blades and attacked from two directions at once. Even so, Mudok evaded them. Before he could launch another attack, Mudok deflected his swords and struck his back. The man groaned in pain. Mudok then raised his sword and unleashed a series of relentless blows. Although the leader was able to block some of them, he struggled to keep up with Mudok's speed. As he lost his balance, Mudok grabbed his head and slammed it into the ground. He seemed to relish the fight. Just as he stood up, rain began to fall. King Tomalova then asked Slav what was happening. Slav then advised the king to stay alert and take a few steps back. Hearing this, King Tomalova suddenly realized something. He told Slav that what they were witnessing was the kingdom's hope. Meanwhile, the assassins were shocked by what Mudok had done to their captain, Murim. They began to wonder if Mudok was a true sword master. Mudok approached them with a furious expression. He said that all of this was their fault. He revealed that his ice cream had melted in the rain and it was entirely their fault. But the assassins didn't even know what ice cream was. Mudok then said he would show them the terrifying fury born from melted ice cream. He warned that he would count to 3, and he couldn't guarantee the safety of anyone still standing after that. The assassins assumed he was just bluffing. One of them said they could easily take him down if they attacked together. The others agreed. But then Mudok started counting. The assassins immediately charged forward, hoping to silence him before he could act. As Mudok reached the count of 3, the assassins were already closing in. At that moment, he activated his protective key. The energy formed a barrier capable of deflecting all incoming attacks. The assassins were stunned by the appearance of the barrier. Mudok then released a massive wave of cold energy. In a calm but chilling voice, he told them not to call his sword heartless. The moment he said that, he swung his sword and massive ice spikes burst from the ground, annihilating the assassins in an instant. King Tomalova and Count Slav were stunned by what they witnessed. After wiping out the assassins, Mudok sheathed his sword and said that his revenge had been fulfilled. Then he leapt away, leaving the area. Slav looked bewildered at how Mudok just left so casually. King Tomalova turned to him and said they had no time to waste. Slav understood exactly what the king meant. He placed his hand over his chest and told King Tomalova that the king's will was his command.